I was standing in my driveway in Mesa, Arizona, watching the sunrise paint the Superstition Mountains orange when I noticed the construction crew tearing up what looked like my back property line. This wasn't just a few guys with shovels. There were excavators, cement trucks, and at least 20 workers swarming around like ants on a dropped popsicle. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips as I realized they were building something massive on land that looked suspiciously like mine. My name is Xavier Lawson, and I had bought this 3-acre parcel in the Sunset Ridge community exactly 18 months ago. The property sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, backing up to open desert, which was precisely why I had paid a premium for it. Privacy, space, no neighbors breathing down my neck. I worked from home as a software consultant, and the solitude was worth every penny of the $600,000 price tag. I set my coffee down on the porch railing and walked toward the construction site, my flip-flops crunching on gravel. The noise was incredible. Beeping trucks, grinding machinery, men shouting over the din. As I got closer, I could see they were pouring a foundation for something enormous. The footprint had to be at least 8,000 square feet. "Hey!" I called out to the nearest worker, a guy in an orange vest. "What are you building here?" He looked up from his clipboard, squinting in the morning sun. "Community clubhouse, should be done in 4 months." My stomach dropped. "Community clubhouse? Who authorized this?" "HOA, man, you got questions? Talk to them." He turned back to his clipboard, clearly done with the conversation. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos. Then I opened my property survey app, the one I had used during the purchase process. My hands were shaking as I waited for the GPS to load. When the property lines appeared on the screen, my worst fears were confirmed. They were building on my land. Not near my property line, not adjacent to it. They were a solid 100 feet inside my boundaries. I jogged back to my house, my mind racing. The HOA. Of course it was the HOA. In the 18 months I had lived here, I had received exactly 43 violation notices from the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association. My grass was too long by half an inch. My trash cans were visible from the street for 12 minutes past the allowed time. My exterior paint color was supposedly not from the approved palette, even though I had never painted anything and this was how the house looked when I bought it. The violations were relentless, petty, and always signed by the same person. Brenda Patterson, HOA president. Inside my house, I went straight to my home office and pulled out the massive folder of HOA documents. The CC and RS bylaws, architectural guidelines, meeting minutes, everything. I had learned early on to keep meticulous records when dealing with Brenda. She was the kind of person who would cite obscure subsection clauses from documents written in 1987 to justify her latest crusade against holiday decorations or the wrong shade of brown on someone's mailbox. I flipped through the documents, looking for anything about a clubhouse. Nothing. There was no mention of any planned community improvements, no special assessments, no architectural plans submitted for review. I checked the meeting minutes from the past year. Still nothing. How could they be building a massive structure without any documentation or community input? My phone rang. It was my neighbor, Marcus, who lived 3 houses down. "Xavier, are you seeing this construction?" Marcus sounded as bewildered as I felt. "Yeah, I am seeing it. On my property." "What? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. They are building on my land, Marcus, like way inside my property line." "That is insane. Have you called the HOA?" "About to. I will keep you posted." I hung up and dialed the HOA management company number listed on all my violation notices. A bored female voice answered. "Sunset Ridge HOA. This is Jennifer speaking." "Hi, Jennifer. This is Xavier Lawson from 2847 Desert Vista Drive. There's a construction crew building something on my property, and I need to know what is going on." "Hold, please." Elevator music filled my ear for 3 minutes. "Mr. Lawson, I show that construction began this morning on the new community clubhouse. This project was approved by the board." "Approved to be built on my private property?" Silence. "I do not have information about the specific lot. You will need to speak with Brenda Patterson directly." "Fine. Give me her number." "I cannot give out personal contact information. I can have her call you back." "When?" "Within 48 hours per HOA policy." Jennifer, there are excavators digging up my land right now. I need to speak with someone today. I will mark it as urgent. Have a nice day. She hung up. I stood there gripping my phone, breathing hard. 48 hours. They could pour the entire foundation in 48 hours. I needed to act faster. I called my real estate attorney, David Hernandez. We had worked together on the property purchase, and he knew the details of my deed inside and out. His secretary put me through immediately when I said it was an emergency. Xavier, what is happening? I explained the situation as clearly as I could, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. David listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, he let out a long whistle. Okay, first thing, stop all construction immediately. You have every right to do that since it is your property. Call the police non-emergency line and request an officer to come out. Tell them someone is trespassing and doing construction without your permission. Second, I am going to pull up your deed and survey right now. Email me those photos you took. Third, do not talk to Brenda Patterson or anyone from the HOA until we get this sorted out. Anything you say could be used against you later. Used against me? I'm the victim here. I know, but these HOA disputes can get ugly fast. Trust me on this. Let me handle the communication. I thanked him and called the Mesa Police Department. The dispatcher said an officer would be out within the hour. I went back outside with my camera, taking more photos and videos from every angle. The construction crew had moved on to building wooden frames for what looked like walls. They were working incredibly fast. A white Lexus SUV pulled up to the construction site, and I watched as Brenda Patterson emerged from the driver's seat. She was exactly what you would picture when someone said HOA Karen. Blonde hair cut in a severe bob, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head. A tennis outfit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She was in her early 50s, with the kind of face that looked like it was perpetually smelling something unpleasant. She spotted me taking photos and marched over, her sneakers barely touching the dusty ground. Mr. Lawson, so wonderful to see you out and about. Isn't this exciting? Our new clubhouse is finally becoming a reality. I kept my camera trained on the construction. This is my property, Brenda. She laughed, a sharp sound like breaking glass. Oh, you are confused. This is community land, designated for common use. It was always intended for a clubhouse. Show me the documentation. I do not need to show you anything. The HOA board has full authority over community improvements. Not on private property, you do not. Her smile tightened. Mr. Lawson, I suggest you familiarize yourself with the CC&RRs. This land was designated for community use in the original development plans from 1985. I bought this property in 2024. The deed is clear. This is my land. We will see about that. She turned and walked back to her Lexus, pulling out her phone. I could see her talking animatedly, gesturing toward me. 20 minutes later, a Mesa police cruiser pulled up. Officer Rodriguez got out, a stocky man in his 40s with kind eyes and an air of someone who had seen everything twice. You called about unauthorized construction? He asked. I explained the situation, showing him my property survey on my phone and the construction happening well within my boundaries. He walked the perimeter with me, taking notes. Brenda appeared again, inserting herself into the conversation. Officer, this is simply a misunderstanding. The HOA owns this land. Do you have a deed showing that? Officer Rodriguez asked. I have the original development plans. That's not a deed. Do you have documentation showing the HOA has legal ownership of this specific parcel? Brenda's face flushed. This is ridiculous. We have been planning this clubhouse for 2 years. We have invested significant community resources. Officer Rodriguez turned to me. Mr. Lawson, do you want this construction stopped? Absolutely. He nodded and walked over to the construction supervisor. They talked for several minutes. I saw the supervisor make a phone call, then start waving his arms at the crew. One by one, the machines shut down. The sudden silence was jarring. Brenda was furious. You cannot do this. This is community property. Madam, until you can provide documentation proving ownership, this is Mr. Lawson's private property, and he has asked for the construction to stop. If you continue, you will be trespassing. I will have my lawyer contact you, she hissed at me, before storming back to her Lexus and speeding away, kicking up dust. Officer Rodriguez handed me his card. Keep documenting everything. If they come back, call us immediately. I would also recommend getting a lawyer involved. Already have one. Thank you, officer. After he left, I stood in the sudden quiet, looking at the partial foundation and scattered construction materials. The construction supervisor approached me cautiously. Look, man, I'm just trying to do my job. The HOA hired us 3 months ago. We had permits and everything. Permits for my property? He pulled out his phone and showed me the documents. Sure enough, there were building permits issued by Maricopa County for a community clubhouse at this address. But the property was listed as owned by Sunset Ridge HOA. How did they get permits using my property? I asked, more to myself than him. No idea. That's above my pay grade. But I need to know, are we continuing this job or not? Because we have a contract and materials ordered. Take it up with the HOA. You are not building anything else here. He sighed and started making calls. I went back inside and forwarded all the photos and information to David. He called me back within an hour. Xavier, this is worse than I thought. Someone filed fraudulent paperwork with the county, claiming the HOA owned your parcel. They used that to get building permits. How's that even possible? It should not be, but county clerks process hundreds of documents a day. If something looks official, it often goes through without heavy scrutiny. This is a serious crime, by the way. Filing false documents, fraud, possibly forgery. What do? I am filing an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning. We will get a court order stopping all construction. I'm also going to report the fraudulent filings to the county and recommend they investigate. In the meantime, keep that construction stopped. If anyone shows up, call the police again. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me jump, worried that the construction crew would come back. But the site remained quiet. The next morning, I discovered someone had placed a violation notice on my front door. According to Brenda Patterson, my failure to maintain a harassment-free environment was in violation of community standards. I took a photo of it and sent it to David with the message, "Can you believe this?" He responded immediately, "Keep it. It is evidence of retaliation." Over the next week, things escalated quickly. David filed the injunction, and a judge granted it within 48 hours. The construction site was officially off limits pending the resolution of the property dispute. But Brenda was not backing down. She sent a letter to every homeowner in Sunset Ridge, painting me as a selfish troublemaker who was preventing the community from having a beautiful new clubhouse. The letter was a masterpiece of manipulation. She claimed the clubhouse would feature a gym, pool, meeting rooms, and event space. She said it would increase everyone's property values by 15%. She included architectural renderings that looked like something from a luxury resort, and she made it clear that I was the only thing standing in the way of this amazing amenity. My mailbox was vandalized 3 times that week. Someone spray-painted "selfish" across my driveway. When I went to the grocery store, neighbors I had never met before gave me dirty looks. One woman actually confronted me in the produce section, telling me I was ruining the neighborhood. Marcus called me almost daily with updates. There's a meeting planned for Thursday night. Brenda is organizing a vote to take legal action against you. Legal action for what? Owning my own property? She is claiming you are in breach of the CC&Rs by preventing community improvements. That is insane. Yeah, but half the neighborhood believes her. That letter she sent out really worked people up. I attended the HOA meeting on Thursday night, even though David advised against it. I needed to defend myself. The community center was packed, at least 200 people crammed into a room designed for maybe 80. The energy was hostile. Brenda stood at the front, presiding over the chaos like a queen holding court. When she saw me enter, her eyes narrowed, but her smile never wavered. "Let's call this meeting to order," she announced, banging a gavel. "We have an urgent matter to discuss. As you all know, our beautiful new clubhouse has been halted due to one resident's refusal to cooperate with community progress." "That is not what happened," I said loudly from the back. Angry murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Let her talk!" Brenda held up her hand. "Mr. Lawson, you will have a chance to speak, but first let me present the facts. The Sunset Ridge HOA has been planning this clubhouse for over 2 years. We have held fundraisers, collected special assessments, and worked tirelessly to make this dream a reality. The total project cost is $450,000, funded entirely by our residents' contributions. Gasps echoed through the room. I felt sick. They had collected almost $500,000 for a building on my property. We secured permits, hired contractors, and began construction on schedule. Then, Mr. Lawson decided his personal preferences were more important than the entire community's well-being. He stopped our construction with a frivolous injunction. "It is not frivolous," I shouted. "You are building on my private property." "That is a lie," a woman yelled from the front row. Brenda's voice rose above the noise. "Mr. Lawson is confused about the property boundaries. The land in question was always designated for community use. We have the original 1985 development plans to prove it." "Show them," I challenged. "Show everyone those plans right now." She shuffled some papers on the podium. "I have them right here. As you can see, Parcel 447B was marked for future community facilities." "What does my deed say?" I pushed my way toward the front, holding up my phone with the property survey displayed. "This is the official county survey from my purchase last year. It clearly shows my property boundaries, and your construction is inside them." An older man in the front stood up. "Let me see that." I handed him my phone. He studied it for a long moment, then looked at Brenda. "I helped develop this neighborhood in 1985. I do not remember any parcel being reserved for HOA use. We sold every lot." Brenda's composure cracked slightly. "Mr. Henderson, that was almost 40 years ago. Perhaps your memory is not what it used to be." "My memory is fine, Brenda, and I am looking at this young man's survey. It looks legitimate to me." The room erupted into arguments. Some people defended Brenda, insisting the HOA must be right. Others started questioning the whole situation. Marcus stood up and asked the question I had been waiting for someone to ask. "Brenda, if you were so sure this was HOA land, why did you file paperwork with the county claiming ownership? That seems suspicious." Her face went pale. "I did no such thing." "Actually, you did," I said. "My attorney has copies of the fraudulent documents filed with Maricopa County. They list the HOA as the property owner, which is false. That is how you got the building permits." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. A man I recognized as Tom Fletcher, the HOA treasurer, stood up slowly. "Brenda, is this true? Did you file false ownership documents?" "This is a witch hunt," she snapped. "I did what was necessary to move this project forward for the good of the community." "That is fraud," Tom said quietly. "That's a crime." "It is a technicality. The land should belong to the HOA. I was correcting an oversight from 40 years ago." Mr. Henderson shook his head. "You cannot just claim someone's property because you think you should have it. This is America, not some dictatorship." The meeting dissolved into chaos. People were yelling, arguing, some demanding answers from Brenda, others still insisting I was the problem. I slipped out and drove home, emotionally exhausted. David called me the next morning with news. "The county is investigating the fraudulent documents. They traced the filings back to Brenda Patterson. She's going to be in serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "Criminal charges, likely. Filing false property records is a felony. She could face jail time." "And the clubhouse?" "Dead in the water. Even if the HOA somehow had a legitimate claim, which they do not, the project is tainted by fraud. No contractor will touch it now." "What about the $450,000? David was quiet for a moment. "That is the real disaster. If the HOA collected that money for a project that cannot happen, there are going to be a lot of angry homeowners. Some of them might have legal claims against the HOA board for mismanagement." Over the next few weeks, the full scope of the disaster became clear. The county's investigation revealed that Brenda had not only filed fraudulent ownership documents, but had also forged signatures on the building permit applications. She had claimed unanimous board approval for the project, but 2 of the 5 board members had never even heard about the clubhouse until construction began. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office filed charges, 3 counts of forgery, 2 counts of filing false documents, and 1 count of fraud. Brenda hired an expensive attorney from Scottsdale and maintained her innocence, claiming everything she did was for the community's benefit. The HOA fell into complete disarray. Tom Fletcher resigned as treasurer, saying he could not be associated with such a mess. The other board members called for Brenda's resignation, But she refused. She insisted she was being persecuted and that I was somehow orchestrating a conspiracy against her. The homeowners were furious. At the next meeting, which Brenda refused to attend, residents learned that the $450,000 had been paid out to contractors in installments. Only about $70,000 remained in the Clubhouse fund. The construction company wanted to be paid for the work they had already done, materials that had been delivered, and equipment that had been used. The HOA's insurance company denied coverage, claiming fraud was not a covered peril. A group of homeowners, led by Marcus and Mr. Henderson, formed a committee to investigate the entire situation. What they uncovered was shocking. Brenda had been running the HOA like her personal fiefdom for 8 years. She had approved contracts without proper board votes, paid vendors without competitive bidding, and maintained almost no financial records. The Clubhouse was just the most egregious example of her mismanagement. I tried to stay out of the internal HOA drama, but it was impossible. People apologized to me constantly. The woman who had confronted me at the grocery store showed up at my door with homemade cookies and tears in her eyes, saying she was sorry for believing Brenda's lies. My vandalized driveway was repainted by volunteers from the neighborhood. Someone even left a fruit basket on my porch with a note saying, "Thank you for standing up to her." The criminal case moved slowly. Brenda's attorney tried every delay tactic imaginable. He filed motions to dismiss, argued the charges were too vague, claimed his client was being selectively prosecuted. But the evidence was overwhelming. The county had her signature on multiple fraudulent documents. They had emails where she discussed the property as if the HOA owned it, despite having been told multiple times by the county clerk's office that the deed showed private ownership. In August, 5 months after the construction had started, Brenda finally appeared in court for a preliminary hearing. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing in her designer clothes. Her attorney presented his arguments, but the judge was not impressed. "Ms. Patterson, the state has presented compelling evidence that you knowingly filed false documents with the county clerk's office. Do you have any explanation for why your signature appears on documents claiming HOA ownership of property that clearly belongs to Mr. Lawson?" Brenda stood up, and for a moment I thought she might actually show some remorse. Instead, she launched into a speech about community values, the importance of shared spaces, and how she had dedicated years of her life to improving the neighborhood. The judge cut her off. "That is not what I asked. Did you or did you not file documents claiming ownership of property that did not belong to the HOA? I believed it was for the greater good." "That is not a legal defense, Ms. Patterson. This case will proceed to trial." Her attorney immediately asked for a continuance. The judge granted it, setting a trial date for January. Meanwhile, the HOA held elections for a completely new board. Every single member of Brenda's administration was voted out or resigned. Marcus ran for president and won by a landslide. His first act was to commission a complete financial audit of the HOA's accounts. The audit results were devastating. Brenda had spent over $600,000 on the Clubhouse project, not $450,000 as she had claimed. The additional money had come from the HOA's reserve fund, which was supposed to be used for emergency repairs and maintenance. She had transferred the money without board approval and without informing the membership. Even worse, she had accepted kickbacks from contractors. The construction company building the Clubhouse was owned by her brother-in-law. She had steered the contract to him with an inflated bid, and he had been paying her 10% under the table. Bank records showed deposits into her personal account totaling almost $60,000. The county attorney added new charges, embezzlement, and bribery. Brenda's bond was revoked, and she spent 3 nights in jail before her attorney could arrange a new hearing. This time, the judge set her bond at $250,000. I watched all of this unfold with a mixture of vindication and sadness. I had never wanted anyone to go to jail. I just wanted to be left alone on my own property. But Brenda had created this disaster entirely on her own through her arrogance and illegal actions. The insurance situation became a nightmare for the HOA. Because Brenda had committed fraud, the association's liability insurance refused to cover any of the costs. The construction company sued for payment. Material suppliers filed liens. The HOA's legal bills were mounting into six figures. Marcus called me in October, sounding exhausted. Xavier, I need to talk to you about something. The new board has been discussing options for resolving this mess. We are functionally bankrupt. The legal claims exceed our total assets. What are you thinking? We might need to levy a special assessment on all homeowners to cover the debts. We are looking at probably $5,000 per household. I whistled. People are going to lose their minds. I know. But the alternative is letting the HOA dissolve entirely, which would be even worse. No one would maintain common areas, handle disputes, or manage community standards. Marcus, I will be honest. After this experience, dissolving the HOA does not sound that bad to me. He laughed bitterly. I get it, but most homeowners do not want that. They just want competent management, which Brenda obviously was not providing. Is there any way to recover money from her personally? We are suing her, of course, but she spent most of it. Her house has a massive mortgage. She drives a leased car. Her bank accounts show about $15,000 total. Even if we win a judgment, we will never collect enough to matter. The trial began in January, almost a full year after the construction had started. The prosecution's case was methodical and damning. They presented the fraudulent documents with Brenda's signature. They showed emails where she discussed the property transfer with the county, despite being told repeatedly that the deed showed private ownership. They brought in witnesses from the construction company who testified that Brenda had assured them the HOA owned the land. The bombshell came when the prosecution revealed the kickback scheme. Brenda's brother-in-law, faced with his own criminal charges, had agreed to testify against her. He explained how Brenda had approached him about the Clubhouse project, promising him the contract if he inflated his bid and paid her 10%. He showed the court copies of checks he had written to her, carefully labeled as consulting fees to hide the true nature of the payments. Brenda's defense was that she genuinely believed she was acting in the community's best interest. Her attorney argued that she was not a criminal, just an overzealous volunteer who made mistakes. He portrayed her as a dedicated public servant who had sacrificed years of her life for an ungrateful neighborhood. The jury was not buying it. After only 6 hours of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on all charges: 3 counts of forgery, 2 counts of filing false documents, 1 count of fraud, 1 count of embezzlement, and 1 count of bribery. The judge scheduled sentencing for March. In the meantime, Brenda remained free on bond, though she had to wear an ankle monitor and was confined to her home. The sentencing hearing was packed. Dozens of homeowners showed up, some supporting Brenda, but most wanting to see justice. The judge allowed victim impact statements. Person after person described how Brenda's actions had financially devastated them. One elderly couple explained that they had paid $15,000 into the Clubhouse fund, money they had saved for years, and now it was gone. A single mother talked about how she would have to take out a loan to pay the special assessment, putting her family in debt. I spoke too, though I kept it brief. Your Honor, I just wanted to own my property in peace. Ms. Patterson's actions turned my life upside down for months. She lied to the community, broke the law, and showed no remorse even when caught. I hope the sentence reflects the seriousness of her crimes. When everyone finished, the judge addressed Brenda directly. Ms. Patterson, you held a position of trust in your community. People relied on you to manage their funds responsibly and to follow the law. Instead, you lied, cheated, and stole. You filed fraudulent documents with county offices, deceiving public officials in the process. You took kickbacks from contractors, enriching yourself at your neighbor's expense. And when confronted with evidence of your crimes, you blamed everyone but yourself. Brenda started to speak, but her attorney put a hand on her arm, stopping her. The judge continued. I have reviewed the sentencing guidelines and the arguments from both sides. While I acknowledge that you have no prior criminal record, the scale of your fraud and the number of victims demand significant consequences. He sentenced her to 7 years in state prison for the forgery and fraud charges, plus 3 years for embezzlement and 2 years for bribery, with some sentences running concurrently. In total, Brenda would serve 8 years behind bars. She would also have to pay restitution in the amount of $600,000, though everyone knew she would never be able to pay that. Brenda's face crumpled when she heard the sentence. Her attorney immediately announced they would appeal, but the judge denied bail pending appeal. 2 bailiffs led her away in handcuffs while her family sobbed in the front row. I felt no joy watching her taken into custody, just relief that it was finally over. The aftermath took months to fully resolve. The HOA negotiated settlements with the construction company and material suppliers, paying them 50 cents on the dollar for their losses. The special assessment was set at $3,500 per household, less than originally feared, but still a significant burden for many families. Some residents refinanced their homes to pay it. Others set up payment plans with the new board. The half-built foundation on my property became a complicated problem. Technically, I owned the concrete and building materials now. The HOA wanted to remove everything and restore the land to its original condition, but they did not have the money. I considered just leaving it, but Marcus convinced me that would create ongoing problems with drainage and property values. We worked out a compromise. The HOA would arrange for removal of all construction materials at no cost to me. In exchange, I agreed not to sue the association for damages, trespassing, or the harassment I had endured. It was not perfect, but it allowed both sides to move forward. The removal took 3 weeks. Crews jackhammered the foundation into chunks, hauled away the materials, and graded the land back to something resembling its original state. I hired a landscaper to plant native desert vegetation, turning the area into a natural extension of my backyard. It actually looked better than before. Life in Sunset Ridge slowly returned to normal, though the community was forever changed. The new HOA board under Marcus's leadership operated with unprecedented transparency. They posted all financial records online, held quarterly town halls, and required multiple board approvals for any expenditure over $500. Architectural review requests were processed fairly and quickly, without the petty tyranny that had characterized Brenda's regime. Some of Brenda's strongest supporters moved away, unable to accept that their hero had been a criminal. Others stayed and admitted they had been wrong. The neighborhood became friendlier somehow, bonded by the shared trauma and recovery. Mr. Henderson, the old developer, became something of a community elder. He attended every HOA meeting, offering institutional knowledge and keeping the new board honest. He told me once that the whole disaster had been a wake-up call for residents to actually pay attention to HOA governance instead of just complaining about violation notices. I never received another frivolous violation letter. My trash cans stayed out as long as I wanted. My grass grew to whatever height I felt like maintaining, and no one said a word because they had learned the cost of letting one person wield too much unchecked power. My attorney, David, became a minor celebrity in real estate law circles. He gave presentations at conferences about HOA, overreach, and property rights, using my case as a cautionary tale. He always emphasized that homeowners need to understand their rights and push back against illegal HOA actions before they escalate. The property where the clubhouse was supposed to stand became my favorite part of the yard. I built a fire pit there and installed some comfortable outdoor furniture. On clear nights, I would sit out there watching the stars, thinking about how close I had come to losing this peaceful corner of the world. Marcus and I became genuine friends through the ordeal. We had barbecues together, watched football games, and occasionally joked about the absurdity of the whole situation. He proved to be an excellent HOA president, approaching the role as a service position rather than a power trip. About 18 months after Brenda's sentencing, I received a letter from the Arizona Department of Corrections. Brenda had written to me. My first instinct was to throw it away unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was surprisingly coherent and thoughtful. She did not apologize exactly, but she acknowledged that she had made serious errors in judgment and acted inappropriately. She claimed that the pressure of managing the HOA had overwhelmed her and that she had convinced herself the ends justified the means. She said prison had given her time to reflect on how badly she had handled everything. The letter ended with a request. She asked if I would consider writing a letter supporting her eventual parole application, emphasizing that I had moved on and held no ill will. The audacity of it actually made me laugh. Even from prison, even after everything, Brenda still thought she could manipulate people into helping her. I wrote back a single sentence. I wish you well in your rehabilitation, but I will not be supporting your parole application. I never heard from her again. The legal fallout continued for years in smaller ways. Several homeowners filed individual lawsuits against Brenda for their losses, though none collected significant amounts. Her house was foreclosed on and sold at auction. Her husband divorced her while she was in prison. I felt bad for her family, who had done nothing wrong but were suffering the consequences of her actions. The county implemented new procedures for property documentation, requiring additional verification before accepting ownership transfers or changes. The clerk who had processed Brenda's fraudulent paperwork received additional training but kept his job. As the investigation concluded, he had no reason to suspect the documents were false. I eventually refinanced my mortgage at a lower rate, and the appraiser commented that my property value had actually increased because of the improved HOA management and community stability. The irony was not lost on me. Brenda's downfall had made everyone's property more valuable. 3 years after the original construction started, I was working in my home office when Marcus called with interesting news. "Xavier, you will never believe this. Someone just bought the lot next to yours, the one on the other side from me, and they are planning to build a community center." My heart stopped. "What?" He laughed. I am kidding, but your face would have been priceless if you could see it right now." "Not funny, Marcus." "A little funny, but seriously, someone did buy that lot. A young couple from California. They seem nice, normal. They asked about the HOA, and I gave them the whole story. They were pretty shocked, but they said they still wanted to move here. Apparently, transparency and accountability in HOA governance is a selling point." Who would have thought? Life continued peacefully after that. I expanded my consulting business, taking on bigger clients and hiring 2 employees who worked remotely. The extra space on my property allowed me to build a separate office structure, which the HOA approved in about 48 hours with no drama whatsoever. I dated someone for a while, a woman named Grace Foster, who worked as a teacher in Chandler. The relationship did not last, but we remained friends. She found the whole HOA saga entertaining and would sometimes joke about writing a book about it. I told her no one would believe it. My parents visited from Oregon and were stunned by how nice the neighborhood was. I showed them where the construction had been, and my dad kept shaking his head in disbelief. "You handled this better than I would have," he said. "I probably would have just bulldozed the whole thing myself and dealt with the consequences later." "That would have been satisfying, but expensive," I replied. Every year on the anniversary of the construction starting, Marcus and I would have a drink together and toast to property rights, transparent governance, and the downfall of tyrants, both large and small. It became our tradition, a way of marking how far the community had come. Brenda served 6 years of her 8-year sentence before being released on parole. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to Tucson to live with her sister and was working as a waitress. Some people expressed satisfaction at her fall from grace. Others felt she had paid her debt to society. I tried not to think about her at all. The most lasting impact of the whole situation was not the legal drama or the financial losses. It was the way the community learned to hold its leaders accountable. HOA meetings went from empty rooms with just the board members to packed events with active participation. Residents asked tough questions, demanded documentation, and refused to accept vague answers. The annual budget review became a major event, with homeowners scrutinizing every line item. This level of engagement meant that serving on the HOA board became actual work rather than a power position. Marcus served 2 terms as president before declining to run again, exhausted by the demands. The people who replaced him were equally dedicated and competent. The association functioned the way it was supposed to, managing common areas and handling legitimate disputes without the petty tyranny that had defined Brenda's era. My property remained my sanctuary. I never built a fence, preferring the open desert views. The native plants I had installed thrived in the Arizona heat, attracting hummingbirds and the occasional roadrunner. Sometimes I would sit out back in the evening and think about how differently things could have turned out if I had not stood up for myself. What if I had just accepted Brenda's assurances that the land was community property? What if I had not called the police that first morning? What if I had not documented everything obsessively? The clubhouse would have been built, my property would have been stolen, and Brenda would have continued her schemes until something even worse happened. Standing up to bullies is exhausting and stressful and sometimes expensive, but it is necessary. Because bullies like Brenda do not stop on their own. They escalate. They push boundaries until someone finally pushes back harder. I taught a webinar about property rights for a local real estate group, sharing my story and the lessons I learned. The main theme was simple: know what you own, document everything, and never assume that official-sounding people are acting legally. Dozens of attendees thanked me afterward, sharing their own HOA horror stories. I realized this was a widespread problem, not just an isolated incident in my neighborhood. Years passed. The neighborhood kids who were toddlers when the construction started were now in elementary school. New families moved in, unaware of the drama that had once consumed Sunset Ridge. The community's reputation shifted from the place with the crazy HOA to the place with the really well-managed HOA. Property values continued to increase. I thought about selling sometimes, cashing in on the equity, and moving somewhere even more remote. But I had grown attached to this place. The view of the Superstition Mountains at sunrise, the quiet desert nights, the hard-won peace. This was my home, purchased legally, defended stubbornly, and kept through perseverance. The construction materials that had been removed from my property were recycled or donated. I heard that some of the lumber went to Habitat for Humanity. At least, something good came from the waste. I never forgot the feeling of seeing those excavators on my land that first morning, the violation and anger and fear. Those emotions had driven me to fight back when it would have been easier to cave. And fighting back had not just protected my property. It had exposed corruption that would have continued destroying people's lives and savings. The $450,000 that Brenda wasted represented real money from real families. People's vacation funds, retirement savings, money set aside for their kids' college. All of it gone because one person thought she knew better than everyone else and had no problem breaking the law to get her way. I occasionally wondered if Brenda ever truly understood the harm she caused. Did she lie awake at night in prison thinking about the elderly couple who lost their savings? Did she feel remorse for the single mother forced into debt? Or did she still see herself as a misunderstood visionary who had been treated unfairly? I would never know, and it did not really matter. What mattered was that justice had been served, the community had recovered, and future residents would benefit from the hard lessons learned. Marcus termed off the HOA board but remained active in community affairs. He organized block parties, helped with neighborhood watch programs, and mentored the new board members. His leadership had been crucial in the recovery, and everyone knew it. Mr. Henderson passed away peacefully at age 92. The HOA named a small park area after him with a plaque describing his role in developing Sunset Ridge and his integrity during the clubhouse crisis. His family thanked me at the dedication ceremony for helping expose the truth. I expanded my outdoor space gradually over the years, adding a vegetable garden, a small greenhouse, and eventually a workshop for woodworking projects I pursued as a hobby. The area where the foundation had been became the most productive part of my yard, the soil enriched somehow by the removal and restoration process. Technology improved and my consulting business evolved, but I never felt the need to move to a bigger city or a more prestigious neighborhood. Sunset Ridge had become truly home, not just because of the property, but because of the relationships forged through adversity. The story of the clubhouse became community legend, told to new residents as a cautionary tale and a source of pride. We had faced a serious threat to our neighborhood's integrity and had come together to overcome it. Not everyone agreed on everything, but we had found common ground in demanding honest, transparent governance. 10 years after that morning when I saw the excavators, I hosted a neighborhood barbecue on my property. Over 100 people showed up, bringing food and drinks and good spirits. Kids played in the yard while adults talked and laughed. Someone asked me to tell the story of the clubhouse one more time, and I obliged, though by now everyone had heard it multiple times. When I finished, an elderly woman I did not know well approached me. "Thank you for fighting," she said simply. "A lot of people would have just given up. You saved this community." I shook my head. "I was just protecting my property. You all saved the community by demanding better leadership." "Maybe we both played a part," she said wisely. As the sun set behind the Superstition Mountains that evening, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I looked around at my neighbors gathered on the land that Brenda had tried to steal. This spot, which was supposed to be a clubhouse built on fraud and arrogance, was instead hosting a genuine community gathering built on respect and honesty. That felt like justice, not the courtroom kind with judges and sentences, though that had been necessary too, but the deeper justice of truth prevailing over lies, of community over corruption, of standing firm when it would have been easier to bend. My property was mine, legally and morally. The neighborhood had learned to govern itself responsibly. And somewhere, hopefully, Brenda Patterson had learned that you cannot just take what you want regardless of law or ethics, even if you convince yourself you are doing it for the greater good. The story could have ended badly in so many ways. I could have lost my property. The HOA could have collapsed entirely. The neighborhood could have been torn apart by lawsuits and recriminations. But instead, we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united. I went inside that night and looked at the framed property deed hanging in my office. I'd put it there after everything was resolved as a reminder of what I had fought for. Not just the land itself, but the principle that ownership means something, that documents and laws matter, that individuals have rights that cannot be violated even by majority vote or community pressure. The red tag that Maricopa County had placed on the construction site during the investigation was long gone, but I had kept a photo of it. The bright red paper reading "Stop Work Order" represented the moment when official authority had validated what I knew all along. This was not a gray area or a misunderstanding. It was fraud, pure and simple, and the government had stepped in to stop it. People sometimes asked me if I regretted buying a property in an HOA. The honest answer was yes, sometimes I did. Life would have been simpler without the constant threat of violation notices and the oversight of busy bodies. But the same HOA framework that had enabled Brenda's tyranny had also provided the structure for holding her accountable and reforming the system. Without the HOA, the neighborhood would have had no mechanism for collective action or improvement. The key was ensuring the HOA served its members rather than the other way around. That required vigilance, participation, and a willingness to stand up to bad actors. It was not glamorous work, but it was necessary. I continued living in my house, working from home, enjoying my property. The parcel that had nearly been stolen became my favorite place to spend time, a constant reminder that sometimes standing up for yourself, even when it is hard and scary and uncertain, is the only way forward. The excavators were gone. The construction materials were gone. Brenda Patterson was gone. But the land remained, legally and rightfully mine, exactly as it should be.